English archaeologist Howard Carter's spectacular discovery in 1922 of the almost intact tomb of the boy pharaoh Tutankhamun in the Valley of the Kings inspired an interest in ancient Egypt which still endures into the 21st century. Indeed, the fabulous gold mask of Tutankhamun has become the popular image of Egyptian civilization. The discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb created a worldwide press sensation, and stories spread about a curse on anyone who dared to break into the pharaoh's tomb. The curse apparently claimed many victims connected with the discovery, many of whom suffered death by violence or in odd circumstances. Theories to explain the reality of the curse include poisonous gases accumulating inside the tomb, and even that the ancient Egyptians used atomic radiation to protect their holy places. Tutankhamun was born in 1341 BC, the son of 18th dynasty pharaoh Akhenaten, and ascended the throne probably in 1332-3 BC at the age of 8 or 9 on the death of his father. Tutankhamun, living image of Amun, ruled from his capital at Memphis to the south of modern Cairo and married his half-sister Ankh-Esenpaten. They had 2 children, but both were stillborn. As pharaoh, Tutankhamun's father Akhenaten had broken with religious tradition, sanctioning the worship of only one god, Aten, and rejecting all other gods. Akhenaten, known as the heretic king, had also moved the Egyptian capital from the traditional Thebes, where modern Luxor now stands, to a new city in mid-Egypt named after himself and known today as El Amarna. During his reign of about 9 years, Tutankhamun restored Egypt's traditional gods and their temples, including Amun, and brought the worship of Aten to an end. He also re-established Thebes as the religious capital of Egypt. When he was around 17 or 18 years old, Tutankhamun died unexpectedly, probably as a result of malaria and an infected broken leg after a fall from his chariot. A recent theory regarding the king's death, suggested by Houghton Ashrifian, a surgeon at Imperial College London, is that he suffered from a form of temporal lobe epilepsy and that his broken leg was caused by a seizure which led to the fall. After his death around 1323 BC, Tutankhamun was buried in a relatively small tomb in the Valley of the Kings. After the tomb was sealed for the last time, debris from the construction of other tombs accumulated in front of it. And almost 2 centuries later, workmen constructing the tomb of Ramesses VI, who reigned from 1145 to 1137 BC, built their huts over its entrance, thus concealing it from view, and inadvertently protecting it from grave robbers for more than 3,000 years, until the arrival of English archaeologist Howard Carter in the early 20th century. The discovery of the tomb. Between 1915 and 1922, Carter undertook a series of excavations in the Valley of the Kings, ancient Egypt's royal burial ground, financed by Lord Carnarvon. Carter had been determined to find the tomb of a pharaoh named Tutankhamun since learning about a cache of funeral goods recovered in a 1907 excavation sponsored by American lawyer Theodore M. Davis. On the 5th of November 1922, Carter and his team discovered a doorway sealed with a royal necropolis seal, showing the jackal-headed god Anubis, symbolizing a king over 9 enemies. Carter knew he was on the verge of discovering a magnificent, untouched tomb. He returned home, sending a cable to Lord Carnarvon in England, which must have made his heart jump. At last, have made wonderful discovery in a valley, a magnificent tomb with seals intact, recovered same for your arrival. Congratulations. On November the 26th, Carter discovered a second sealed doorway, almost the same as the first, with similar seal impressions. Unable to restrain himself any further, Carter made a hole in the top of the doorway and using a candle looked inside. He describes in his excavation diary what he saw. It was some time before one could see. The hot air escaping caused the candle to flicker, but as soon as one's eyes became accustomed to the glimmer of light, The interior of the chamber gradually loomed before one, with its strange and wonderful medley of extraordinary and beautiful objects heaped upon one another. With the light of an electric torch as well as an additional candle, we looked in. Our sensations and astonishment are difficult to describe, as the better light revealed to us the marvelous collection of treasures. 2 strange ebony black effigies of a king, gold-sandaled, bearing staff and mace, loomed out from the cloak of darkness. Gilded couches in strange forms, lion-headed, heather-headed, and beast infernal, exquisitely painted, inlaid and ornamental caskets, flowers, alabaster vases, strange black shrines with a gilded monster snake appearing from within, finely carved chairs, a golden inlaid throne, stools of all shapes and design, of both common and rare materials, and, lastly, a confusion of overturned parts of chariots glinting with gold, peering from amongst which was a mannequin. A huge treasure of more than 5,000 items were eventually discovered in Tutankhamun's tomb, and when they had been photographed and recorded, most items were shipped to Cairo, where they're now held in the Museum of Egyptian Antiquities. Roughly 700 artifacts were discovered in the antechamber, which seemed to contain the objects used by the pharaoh in his everyday life, and had been deposited in this chamber to follow him into the afterlife. The Curse of Tutankhamun. Carter's diary for March 20th, 1923, notes that he left for Cairo due to the illness of Lord Carnarvon, who had contracted blood poisoning thought to have been caused by an infected mosquito bite on the cheek. The next day, Carter describes Carnarvon as very ill with an acute attack of blood poisoning, and on the 26th writes that he'd had developed pneumonia. Carnarvon died early in the morning of April 5th in the Continental Savoy Hotel in Cairo, less than 2 months after the official opening of the burial chamber of Tutankhamun. After the excavations of Tutankhamun's tomb came to an end in 1932, Howard Carter returned to London, retiring from archaeology and undertaking part-time work as an agent for museums and private collectors, while at the same time working on the publication of his findings from the Valley of the Kings. But on the 2nd of March 1939, he died of lymphoma, a type of cancer, in Kensington, London at the age of 64, before he was able to fully publish his discoveries. The relatively early deaths of Lord Carnarvon and Howard Carter, as well as others connected with the excavation of Tutankhamun's tomb, has led to stories of some kind of Pharaoh's curse. Shortly after the tomb was opened in 1923, a British novelist with an interest in the mystical, Marie Corelli, pseudonym of Mary Mackay, issued a dramatic warning that was published in the New York World, in which she said that the most dire punishment follows any rash intruder into a sealed tomb. There were stories that an ancient Egyptian warning had been found inside the tomb, and when Lord Carnarvon died 6 weeks after the tomb had been opened, Arthur Conan Doyle, the creator of Sherlock Holmes, and by this time a convinced spiritualist, suggested his death had been caused by elementals or curses concocted by ancient Egyptian priests to guard the tomb of the king Tutankhamun, but no such curse had ever been found inside the tomb. Theories for the curse. A number of theories have been put forward concerning the curse of Tutankhamun, including the ancient Egyptians' use of poisons or toxins in the protection of the tomb of the boy king Pharaoh. In recent years, a scientific mummy's curse theory has been offered where exposure to ancient, toxic pathogens from the sealed tomb may have affected many of the visitors to the site, including Lord Carnarvon, Jennifer Wegner, an Egyptologist at the University of Pennsylvania Museum, including Lord Carnarvon. Jennifer Wegner, an Egyptologist at the University of Pennsylvania Museum in Philadelphia, said, "When you think of Egyptian tombs, you have not only dead bodies, but foodstuffs, meats, vegetables, and fruits. It certainly may have attracted insects, molds such as bacteria, and those kind of things. The raw material would have been there thousands of years ago." Recent laboratory studies have shown that some ancient mummies do indeed carry potentially dangerous species of mold. These molds can cause allergic reactions ranging from congestion to bleeding in the lungs, which can be particularly harmful for people with weakened immune systems. In 1949, an atomic scientist called Louis Bolginari suggested that contamination through atomic radiation could explain the curse. He commented on the subject at the time, saying that it is definitely possible that the ancient Egyptians used atomic radiation to protect their holy places. The floors of the tombs could have been covered with uranium, or the graves could have been finished with radioactive rock. Rock containing both gold and uranium was mined in Egypt. Such radiation could kill a man today. This theory may not be as far-fetched as it sounds. In 1999, James Bigu of Laurentian University in Sudbury, Ontario, and researchers with the Atomic Energy Authority of Egypt in Cairo examined 7 ancient Egyptian monuments, including tombs in the Valley of the Kings. 3 were found to have potentially hazardous radon concentrations. The highest level was in the Samkat Pyramid at Saqqara, south of Cairo. Radon is produced by the decay of uranium in the ground and in rocks used to build the monuments. Bearing such evidence in mind, it's surely possible that high levels of radon inside Tutankhamun's tomb was responsible for causing the Pharaoh's curse.
When you look at the Great Pyramid at Giza, one of the 7 wonders of the world, it's tempting to think that it was simply a magnificent mausoleum created by the pharaoh Khufu, or Cheops, as his final resting place. But as we'll see, that is far from the truth. It certainly is a wonder, but a wonder far greater than most people realize. Strangely, the Great Pyramid has none of the normal characteristics of Egyptian tombs, like hieroglyphs, extravagant artifacts, ornate wall art, or elaborate coffins. Furthermore, the pyramid was aligned with the points of the compass with a precision that could only be matched by today's engineers. There are about 2.5 million stones, each weighing between 2 and 40 tons, and every one of them perfectly placed. The mathematics required for the unusually impeccable precision of the Great Pyramid's construction would be very advanced. Although, as normal, most of the pyramid was made of grey-yellow nummulite limestone, other, most unusual materials were also used, like rare granite lining the king and queen's chambers, and other rare forms of limestone covering the entire pyramid. But more of that later. In one of the greatest finds of this century, archaeologists have unearthed a 4,500-year-old papyrus, which describes how, unlike many other pyramids, highly skilled technicians led the construction by professional engineers to ensure its precise alignments, including, as now speculated, with the stars of Orion's belt as they were nearly 5,000 years ago. It was also constructed with unusual speed, 20 years at the most. So why the haste? Was it needed for something else? It's a puzzle, and the only way to solve a puzzle is to follow the clues. So, like true researchers, let's do just that. Many people don't realize that the pyramidal cap is missing. It was almost certainly made of solid gold, or gold-plated at the very least. Surely a huge cap of gold worth millions, possibly billions of dollars by today's value, was excessive, even for such an important pharaoh. Gold, as I'm sure you know, is one of the best conductors of electricity. And that's our first clue as to the real purpose of the pyramid. The second clue is the Great Pyramid's interior is incredibly complex. Far too complex for a simple mausoleum. it comprises multiple chambers and shafts that are significantly different from the interiors of many of the other 180 pyramids of ancient Egypt. It was almost as if it were a kind of factory or machine with chambers of specialized granite, possibly containing materials or equipment, and then connected for some reason by these highly specialized shafts. The third clue is that the entire pyramid was originally covered by a thick layer of limestone comprising nearly 150,000 so-called casing stones, all highly polished, interlocking and flat to an accuracy of 1/100th of an inch. It would have been an amazing sight, pure white and brilliant in the tropical sunlight. But it wasn't so much about decorating the pyramid. It had a practical and technical function, hence the extreme accuracy. One of the best electrical insulators is limestone, and the limestone used to coat the Great Pyramid is a rare form which was brought from nearby Tura. Unlike common limestone, Tura limestone does not contain magnesium, which has the effect of reducing its insulation properties. The Great Pyramid was, in effect, the perfect insulator of any electricity that might have been generated within, both containing it and controlling it. The fourth clue is that a rare type of granite, rose granite, was used to construct some of the chambers in the pyramid and was transported more than 500 miles downriver from Aswan. Granite contains silica oxide, better known as the crystal quartz, and the Aswan granite used for the lining of the king and queen's chambers is almost pure quartz, 85%. Why is that important? Well, if you squeeze quartz and many other crystalline substances, static electricity is generated by the compression and movement of the atomic lattices. This is known as the piezoelectric effect, and thousands of years later is used in many forms of our technology. For example, if you have a record turntable, the stylus is typically a diamond crystal or a sapphire crystal that gets bounced from side to side along the grooves. This bouncing compresses or distorts these crystals, generating electricity, which is amplified to make the sounds we can hear. If the ancient Egyptian scientists could find a way to compress the quartz granite inside the pyramid's chambers, electricity would be generated, fully insulated by the limestone covering, and therefore the charge would have no choice but to find its way to the place of least electrical resistance, namely the gold cap. So, the only remaining clue we have to find is to see if there's any concrete evidence about how the ancient Egyptians could have compressed the quartz crystals in the granite body of the pyramid. And that clue is in the nature of the otherwise inexplicable trace chemicals found in 2 of the shafts. What are these chemicals that really have no place within a burial mausoleum? First, there are traces of hydrochloric acid in the southern shaft of the Queen's chamber, and of hydrated zinc chloride in the northern shaft. If these chemicals are brought together in a confined place, they react very strongly, releasing huge quantities of hydrogen gas. In his book, The Giza Power Plant, Technologies of Ancient Egypt, Christopher Dunn explains the entire process in detail. Step 1. As we've said, the southern shaft of the Queen's chamber contained hydrochloric acid, and the northern shaft contained hydrated zinc chloride. But they were kept at separate ends because they can react together so violently. Step 2. When these chemicals were deliberately mixed together, released towards each other down the shafts and into the Queen's chamber, huge quantities of hydrogen gas would have been released. Step 3. This pressurized hydrogen gas could only flow into the Grand Gallery. Unusually, the Queen's chamber's shafts do not vent externally. After entering the Grand Gallery, the gas passed through 27 mechanical resonators, whose fixings are still in place. Resonance is simply the sound you get if, for example, you blow air across the top of an empty bottle. This sound is, in effect, highly excited, turbulent kinetic energy, which can be used for step 4. After travelling through the Grand Gallery, the turbulent hydrogen was forced into the King's Chamber, where that rhythmical sound energy, created by the resonators, would pulsate against the granite walls, floor and ceiling, compressing and distorting the quartz, and through the piezoelectric effect that we looked at earlier, generate electricity. The Great Pyramid, by all the evidence and science available, may have been the engine of a great power plant, where hydrogen gas was used to create electricity that indeed could have been beamed wirelessly around the world, emitted by that gold cap in a way that is exactly the same as Nikola Tesla's amazing proposal for wireless electricity, a proposal that disappeared along with most of his papers. There is some evidence that the ancient Maya and other cultures were producing similar energy, forming a huge electromagnetic network in the ionosphere, which, it is suggested, might have been harnessed by UFOs. But in fairness, this is just speculation, fascinating though it is, and we are concerned here with hard, provable facts. Dr. Brett I. Cohen has proposed a somewhat modified version of the theory. Again, it's based on observable facts, but coming to a slightly different scientific explanation of how the pressure waves that compressed the granite were created. Apparently, according to Dr. Cohen, a highly respected physical scientist, there were traces of sulfuric acid in the southern shaft of the Queen's Chamber, not hydrochloric acid, as Christopher Dunn has claimed. And in the northern shaft there is ammonium chloride, as well as zinc chloride. Both of these could produce hydrogen without being mixed. And if that excited hydrogen were mixed with oxygen, just from the air, possibly by some form of blast furnace technique, a very powerful chemical explosion would occur. This explosion would create a massive blast wave, or pressure wave, which, as with Christopher Dunn's explanation, would travel through the Grand Gallery and into the King's Chamber, violently compressing the granite walls, floor and ceiling, and thus creating electricity. A problem with this explanation is that when the hydrogen and oxygen react to produce an explosion, they also produce water, as we all know, and it would be in huge quantities. Where would it go? Luckily, there is a simple answer. Recently, aquifers, layers of trapped water, have been found directly beneath the Great Pyramid's mysterious subterranean shafts and chambers. Presumably, it's somewhere to drain the water. Because let's face it, dead pharaohs are not likely to need a water supply. But wouldn't there be evidence of these explosions? Recent research has uncovered a dark stain on the granite upper wall and ceiling of the Grand Gallery, where the explosions would have taken place. These stains appear to be the remnants of charring from heat. Furthermore, cracks have been discovered in the granite beams in the ceiling of the King's Chamber by renowned Egyptologist Stephen Mahler. When the blast of super-hot gas rushed from the Grand Gallery into the King's Chamber, the pressure would, of course, have been enormous. It is entirely possible that apart from the piezoelectric compression, some actual damage would eventually occur, hence the cracks. But that's not the only evidence of controlled explosions. The Great Step outside the King's Chamber has evidently suffered extensive damage. Dozens of cubic feet have been blasted away. None of this damage is recent. It has been dated through analysis to the 5th century before Common Era. So what can we conclude from this? Through controlled chemical reactions in the connecting shafts, hydrogen gas was produced in the Queen's Chamber. This gas was either mixed with oxygen and thus exploded to create huge pressure waves, or was made turbulent by being passed over mechanical resonators. Either way, these pressure waves passed through the Grand Gallery to be trapped in the King's Chamber, where they would compress the granite walls, floor and ceiling and thus create electricity in huge quantities through the piezoelectric effect. Therefore, it is entirely scientifically possible that the Great Pyramid at Giza was being used to generate electricity thousands and thousands of years before its so-called discovery in the West. Inevitably, there are those who dispute the theory of energy generation in the Great Pyramid. However, facts are facts. And it is a fact that the pyramid is constructed from rare granite with piezoelectric properties, that the pyramid is fully insulated with rare limestone, and that it was capped with gold, one of the best natural conductors of electricity. Skeptics can try and dispute the electricity generation theory, but the science holds up. And if the science holds up, then a theory is valid. So why do people so vehemently poo-poo this theory? It's probably down to simple psychology. Every generation tends to think that it is the most advanced one that has ever existed, that earlier civilizations are inevitably more primitive than we are. Actually, in the minds of many, more stupid than we are. And the fact that you are interested in early civilizations and their achievements shows that, thankfully, you have the intelligence to avoid this arrogant prejudice. Indeed, this arrogance is harmful to our understanding of the story of human civilization and our appreciation that, as Sir Isaac Newton said, we all stand on the shoulders of giants. For example, at school, we were taught that the blast furnace was invented in Europe only a few hundred years ago. And yet the Chinese, without doubt, were using it nearly 2,000 years ago for the production of high-quality steel for their farm tools and weapons. We started with a puzzle, and we have followed the clues, the evidence, and the science. And in conclusion, we are left with two simple questions. First, is there definitive proof that the Great Pyramid at Giza was used by the ancient Egyptians for the production of electricity? Whilst there is some most convincing evidence, the answer, at the moment, has to be no. More evidence is needed. But second, is it scientifically and technically possible that it could have been used for that? And the inescapable, provable answer is yes.
According to a reading from a newly digitized fragment of the Dead Sea Scrolls, Noah's Ark was something different than what is currently believed. The 2,000-year-old text may be proof that the Ark was the shape of a pyramid. Over 50 years ago, a stone thrown by a Bedouin shepherd into a cave led to what some have called the greatest archaeological discovery of the 21st century. The Bedouin heard the stone crack open an earthenware jar. Upon investigating, he found the first of what came to be known as the Dead Sea Scrolls. When all of the scrolls and fragments were sorted out, they accounted for about 800 manuscripts. About 1/4, or just over 200 manuscripts, are copies of portions of the Hebrew Bible text. Now, after almost 5 years, a laboratory established by the Israel Antiquities Authority as part of the Leon Levy Dead Sea Scrolls Digital Library project has scanned tens of thousands of fragments from the scrolls with a custom-made camera. Each fragment was photographed 28 times at high resolution using different wavelengths of light. The sophisticated technology enabled researchers to read letters and words that were previously illegible. Some of the newly digitized fragments offered new interpretations of well-known biblical stories. New fragments deciphered. Haaretz reported that the new reading of the fragments has changed our understanding about Noah's Ark. Thanks to the high-resolution imagery, a word following the phrase "the Ark's tallness" had previously been illegible. However, the new scan showed that the correct words mean "gathered," which according to researcher Alexei Yuditsky mean that the Ark's ribs were gathered together at the top in the shape of a pyramid. The doctor said that a Greek translation of the Bible dating to the 3rd century BC used a Greek verb with a similar meaning to describe the Ark. Moreover, medieval authors suggested that the ark's roof was pointed. The newly deciphered words on the ancient parchments stayed hidden for centuries, but are now bringing answers to many long-standing questions, as well as raising new ones. Previously, the story of Noah's Ark was known mainly from the Book of Genesis. However, the Dead Sea Scrolls found in the Qumran cave in the Judean desert shed new light on this story. Noah's Ark, not just a biblical story. The Dead Sea Scrolls contain information about many controversial and fascinating topics from the past, the story of Noah and the legendary flood being just one of them. Guest author of Ancient Origins explained in his articles Evidence of the Great Flood, Real or Myth, that the story of Noah is not just a biblical account. He said, the story of a great flood sent by God, or gods according to much earlier testimony, to destroy humanity for its sins is a widespread account shared by many religions and cultures around the world, and dates back to our earliest recorded history from India to ancient Greece. Mesopotamia, and even North American Indian tribes, there is no shortage of such tales that often enough sound very much alike. Some of these stories truly sound so similar that one could wonder whether all cultures around the planet had experienced such an event. Only after 7000 BC, when the ocean levels finally began stabilizing, human life once more began to return to normal. Coastal sites no longer had to be abandoned for higher ground, at least for the most part, and between 6000 and 5000 BC, once more we began to see signs of human activity closer to the sea. Is it a mere coincidence that our recorded history happens to start around this time? Is it true that early humans were too primitive to leave traces of their existence behind, or all the early pages of our history were washed away by the great flood of the last ice age? After all, it seems that as soon as the adverse climatic conditions receded, it didn't take long for humans to thrive once again. Digitization solves decades-long puzzle. Another discovery resulting from the digitization is connected with two fragments that shed light on a puzzling word in the Bible. Chapter 39 of Genesis describes how Judah had sex with his daughter-in-law Tamar. She disguised herself as a prostitute, and as a guarantee of payment, she received his signet, staff, and till. After many centuries of debate regarding the meaning of the word till, the Dead Sea Scrolls have finally given the answer with the following sentence: till is his belt. As Moshe Bar Asher, the Academy president, said, the word till is mentioned in the Bible 10 times. In every place, we know what it is and what its function is, except for the till Tamar received. On this, our ancestors were divided, but now we have an early text from the 1st century as the latest, which gives the meaning of this till. It's the belt with which he tied his trousers or his robe. Despite decades of study and analysis, the Dead Sea Scrolls are still giving up their secrets. Researchers from the Haifa University have reconstructed the contents of one of the last two undeciphered Dead Sea Scrolls, disclosing a distinctive calendar used by a Jewish sect that lived in the Judean desert during the Second Temple period. Most important archaeological find in Israel's history. 60 small fragments were pieced together over a period of 12 months, identifying the name of a festival marking the changes between seasons. It also revealed a second scribe corrected mistakes made by the original author, as BBC had reported. The collection is considered to be the oldest copy of the Hebrew Bible ever found, dating it to at least the 4th century BC. Tens of thousands of fragments belonging to over 900 scrolls were found in the caves at Qumran, Dr. Eshbal Ratson from the Bible department at Haifa University told Haaretz, and adds, this is the most important archaeological find ever made in Israel. This is literature from the Second Temple period, and that's rare. It's not known who wrote the scrolls, even though several historians have suggested that the writers were a desert sect called the Essenes. They describe they were assisted in deciphering the codes by annotations discovered in the margins by a scribe correcting omissions made by the author. Written in 3 different languages. Dr. Ratson explained that it took decades that involved many scientists and researchers to piece the fragments together, decrypt them, and then publish their contents. Still, 2 of them remained undeciphered. The scrolls are written in 3 languages: Hebrew for the most part, Aramaic, while a few of them are written in Greek. The scroll Dr. Ratson worked on with Professor Jonathan Bedov, also from the Bible department at Haifa University, was written in coded Hebrew, and some of the fragments were smaller than 1 square centimeter. Very few scrolls that had previously been deciphered were written in this language, she says via Haaretz. A unique 364-day calendar. The 2 experts noticed a unique 364-day calendar, which was already known to researchers and differs significantly from the one Jews used at the period. Most Jews used a calendar that is similar to the one used today. The sect used a calendar that is almost based on a solar year, comprising 364 days. There are months with 30 or 31 days in every season, Dr. Ranson stated via Haaretz, and adds 364 divided into 7, so every date falls on a specific day of the week and every holiday has a fixed date. We know that in the temple there were disputes between different sects over what happens if Passover falls on Shabbat. What supersedes what, Shabbat or the holiday? This sect solved the problem, since no holiday fell on Shabbat. This scroll details all dates on which Shabbat falls and all the days of the week on which holidays fall. Dr. Ratson also explained that when significant events took place inside a temple, such as the high priest making a sacrifice on Yom Kippur, only one calendar could be used. But this calendar was disputed, which may be one of the reasons this sect left the temple and went into the desert. They had many disputes, and this was one of them. They couldn't celebrate holidays together. The Tekufa. Furthermore, the researchers also noticed the name used by the sect for a festival commemorated 4 times a year that marked the transition between the seasons, the Tekufa. The same word in modern-day Hebrew means period. This shows us that the researchers who believed the day of celebrating the transition between the seasons was called by this name were correct, and that this word, as used in the Mishnah, was preserved from the days of the Second Temple. It's a very early concept in halakha, religious Jewish law. Dr. Razan stated via Haaretz, adding that the unique calendar also refers to annual wine and olive harvest festivals no longer observed in Judaism. Meanwhile, a research team is currently excavating a 12th cave that might hide further scrolls to be deciphered. The cave was discovered last year, and only 1 blank scroll was found at that time. Details of what has been discovered by the team from Liberty University in Lynchburg, Virginia, are due to be revealed soon. Are the pyramids in Russia's Kola Peninsula thousands of years older than those of Giza in Egypt? And might they offer proof that Hyperborean civilization of Greek legends actually existed and called these northern regions home? Not only are the shape of these huge mountains far from naturally occurring, but many of the stones that were used to construct them also appear to have been cut with such precision that it suggests the use of something akin to a modern laser-type instrument. And even more remarkable, if it's estimated that these structures could be more than twice as old as the pyramids, being built around 9,000 years ago. Nearby are equally well-constructed walls, as well as evidence of some kind of irrigation system. The 2 stone structures themselves are step pyramids, very much like the ones that are scattered around Central and South America. We might ask how these civilizations, supposedly independent of each other and separated by vast distances, and indeed thousands of years, might construct almost identical style stone buildings. Could there have been a highly advanced civilization in the Kola Peninsula in modern-day Russia around 7000 BC? Located in the furthest regions of Russia, with the Barents Sea on one side and the White Sea on the other, the region suffers through yearly winter-like conditions and contains some of the most treacherous terrain on the planet. They might, though, harbour secrets that, should they be revealed, would paint a drastically different picture of history than we currently have. One of the first people to take an interest in these apparent artificial structures was Russian scholar and biologist Alexander Vasilievich Barchenko, who ventured to the region in the mid-1920s. His conclusions, based on considerable time spent at the location itself, as well as the exhaustive study of the ancient writings and literature of the region and Masonic literature, led him to believe that the pyramids were indeed very ancient, at least 9,000 years old, if not older. And what's more, he firmly believed that they had been constructed by the Hyperborean civilization. To most mainstream historians and scholars, the Hyperborean civilization is nothing more than myth and legend, Greek legend to be specific. They tell the tales of an advanced civilization who inhabited the far north of the region and who were knowledgeable in ancient wisdom. It's certainly worth noting that the locations of the Russian pyramids on the Kola Peninsula and how its appearance matches quite nicely with the descriptions given in the ancient Greek writings. One of the earliest historians of ancient Greece, Hecataeus of Miletus, for example, described the Hyperborean civilization as being located on an island in the ocean that was beyond the country of the Celts. Similarly, another Greek historian, Diodorus Siculus, stated that the Hyperboreans lived on an island in the sea that was not smaller than Sicily. When we look at the location of the Russian pyramids, a piece of land surrounded by the Barents and White Seas, we can see how this would very much fit the description of an island. And while most Greek writings state that the area enjoyed seasonal fair weather as opposed to the year-long winter-like conditions today, many researchers will put this down to a differing environment thousands of years ago, perhaps even because of a pole shift that sent the land higher north than it previously was. Indeed, such a pole shift, for the sake of argument, might explain their sudden end. It was Barchenko's conclusion that the Hyperborean civilization likely arrived in the Kola Peninsula from even further north, around 10 to 12,000 years ago, at the end of the last ice age, and with them they brought advanced technology and knowledge of atomic energy, levitation, and flight. Might Barchenko have been correct? Could the writings of ancient Greek that speak of this ancient civilization not be merely myth, but are in fact accounts of historical fact, passed down from thousands of years before even ancient Greek scholars committed them to the historical records? We might remind ourselves that the ancient city of Troy was once treated as nothing but legend until it was discovered in 1871 by Heinrich Schliemann. And if the once presumed legends of Troy are actually true historical accounts, then the same might one day be able to be said of the Hyperborean civilization, or even the legends of Atlantis, or the Greeks also documented. Barchenko, incidentally, was almost universally shunned by his peers for his conclusions, and would meet his untimely end on April 25, 1938, in Moscow, when he was executed during the Great Purge of Joseph Stalin. Almost 70 years after his death in 2007, a team of Russian scientists and archaeologists ventured out to the Kola Peninsula in order to investigate the pyramids for themselves. Although they would manage to study the pyramids up close, due to the difficult terrain, they had to view much of the surrounding area from the air only. This meant that some of the suspected buildings and ruins were not visible to them and could not be examined. The pyramids themselves, however, were certainly interesting. They each measured 150 feet in height and were linked by an apparently purposely and precisely built bridge. Using some of the most up-to-date techniques and devices, they would ultimately conclude that the structures were almost certainly artificial constructs, with some examinations appearing to show purposely hollowed-out sections or rooms. They wouldn't, however, comment on who might have built them or for what purpose. All indications, though, are that they were indeed around 9,000 years old, with the possibility that they could have been, as unbelievable as it might sound, built as long as 40,000 years ago. What is also worth mentioning, at least according to those on the expedition, is that many locals who had agreed to assist the team appeared evasive with directions and are fully revealing what they knew of the location, as if they were protecting some kind of secret known only to a very select few. Might this have been the case? Are the Russian pyramids proof of an advanced civilization at least 4,000 years older than that of the ancient Egyptians? And might they also be proof of the apparently legendary Hyperborean civilization? Perhaps we should contemplate once more Barchenko's assertion that this mysterious civilization entered the Kola Peninsula at the end of the last ice age, somewhere in the region of 10 to 12,000 years ago. This would coincide quite nicely with the approximate timing of the fall of the Atlantean society. Might the Hyperborean civilization and that of Atlantis be one and the same? We might recall, for example, that many of the technologies and knowledge Barchenko attributed to the Hyperboreans were almost identical to apparent advancement of the Atlanteans. And we might consider further that many researchers have proposed that the start of the Atlantean society could very well connect to legends of entities who came down from the stars and were perceived as gods, essentially extraterrestrials from another world. If we allow ourselves a moment's contemplation, if there is any truth at all to the notion that the Hyperborean civilization, with their advanced technology and knowledge of flight, might have a connection to the extraterrestrial beings who came to Earth thousands and thousands of years ago, might this explain why UFO sightings are so rife in and around water networks of Russia, from the Barents Sea on one side to Lake Baikal on the other, and the waters in the largely inhospitable terrain of Siberia? Might the presence of this seemingly long-lost civilization still be here today? Admittedly, this is just rampant speculation, but speculation that perhaps deserves further study. Indeed, only further collaborative, serious, open-minded, transparent study will unlock the mysteries of these ancient monuments and others like them. No serious excavations have actually taken place around the Russian pyramids, which leaves the door open for all kinds of possibilities, even with what little we already know. All of the expeditions to the area that have gone ahead have only enjoyed limited success, in part because of the harsh environment and unforgiving terrain, which only adds to the complexity of really investigating this ancient location. Of course, the vast majority of mainstream scholars, archaeologists, and historians will tell you that the Russian pyramids were likely astronomical observatories or possibly a place of worship. Perhaps they were. What's for certain is that these ancient structures have further secrets to reveal, secrets that could prove life-changing for all of us. Ultimately, that these pyramids are yet another example of advanced building techniques from thousands of years ago, buildings of the same style of structure found around the world, each surrounded by legends that appear that are equally identical, should perhaps alert us to the very real chance that one great civilization, possibly one of global influence, is responsible for many of the great civilizations of antiquity that followed them, one that is a huge missing piece of our collective history. The recent discovery of 6 ancient pyramids at an ancient city known as Caral along the Peruvian coast has shocked the archaeological world. The existence of pyramids indicates the presence of a civilization around 5,000 years ago, which would make it the oldest known civilization in the Americas. But that's not all. Not only is this civilization older than anything previously discovered, but it was also far more advanced than archaeologists ever thought possible at that remote period. The ancient city of Caral in the Supe Valley, a region of Peru's high desert in between the rainforests, mountains, and the Pacific coast, 120 miles north of Peru's capital city of Lima. The valley here is full of ancient monumental structures. Caral was first discovered in 1905, but was largely ignored by archaeologists because they believed its structures were of relatively recent date. The city was further explored by American history professor Paul Kosok in 1948, but not fully excavated. And it was not until the 1970s that archaeologists discovered that the large hills at Corral, thought by previous explorers and archaeologists to be natural hills, were actually ancient pyramids. Since the 1990s, studies and excavations at Corral have been undertaken by Peruvian archaeologist Ruth Shady Solis of San Marcos University. Fortunately for archaeologists, Corral is remarkably well preserved, mainly due to its early abandonment and late discovery. The vast urban complex of Corral takes up more than 150 acres and contains plazas, dwellings, pyramids, and a 92-foot-high temple. Shady's excavations at the site also uncovered a large sunken amphitheatre, which could have held hundreds of people, probably during civic or religious events. Inside the amphitheatre, archaeologists discovered 32 flutes made of pelican and condor bones, as well as 37 cornets of deer and llama bones. Clearly, music played an important role in their society, said Shady. During one season of excavation, Shady's team examined Pyramid Maya at 60 feet in height and covering an area nearly the size of 4 American football fields, the largest of the 6 pyramids at the site. Inside, they found a 30-foot-wide staircase, circular walls covered with the remains of colored plaster and square brickwork. But what proved to be their most significant find was located in the foundations of the great structure. Here, they discovered the well-preserved remains of reed-woven bags known as shikras. Shady thought that the workers who built these ancient structures would have filled these bags with stones from a hillside quarry located a mile away and laid them on top of one another inside retaining walls, gradually building up the giant structure of the pyramid. But most significant of all was the fact that the reeds which made up the basket could be radiocarbon dated. The academic world was astonished at these results, which demonstrate that Corral dated back to 2627 BC, and so is 1,000 years older than the earliest known civilization in the Americas. Jonathan Haas, MacArthur Curator of Anthropology at the Field Museum, Chicago, said of the incredible findings, "The scale and sophistication of these sites is unheard of anywhere in the New World at this time. The cultural pattern that emerged in this small area in the 3rd millennium BC later established a foundation for 4,000 years of cultural fluorescence in other parts of the Andes." This date means that Corral was a thriving metropolis as Egypt's Great Pyramids and England's Stonehenge were being built. Ruth Shady Solis believes that Corral may be the answer to the long unanswered question about the mysterious origins of the Inca, the civilization that once stretched from modern-day Ecuador to central Chile and were responsible for building sites like Cusco and Machu Picchu. But one important question puzzles Shady. Why would people who live comfortably in small communities on the Pacific Ocean with easy access to plentiful marine food choose to move miles inland to a harsh desert environment? Evidence from Shady's excavations at Corral, including necklaces of snails and the seeds of the coca plant, neither of which was native to the area, convinced her that the site had served as an important trading center for the region. The wealth accumulated as a result of this trade caused the emergence of an elite of priests and planners, builders and architects. According to Shady, the class distinctions essential to an urban society thus emerged at Corral. The main non-edible product grown in the area seems to have been cotton, which was widely used in the manufacture of fishing nets, clothing, bags and ornaments. Indeed, cotton farming is believed to have been the main reason for the rise of inland settlements. But Corral was not an isolated site. Soon 20 other pyramid complexes, which seem to have been based on the mother city, emerged scattered across the 35-square-mile area of the Soup Valley. Archaeologists believe that the Corral civilization, also known as Corral Soup, was part of the Norte Chico civilization complex, who lived in what is now the Norte Chico region of north-central coastal Peru. One unique aspect of the Norte Chico was its architecture. Their cities were important urban centers with monumental terraced stone pyramids and large sunken circular plazas. Around 1800 BC, for reasons which have not been fully explained, the Norte Chico civilization collapsed and its cities were abandoned. The inhabitants just had time to protect some of their architectural structures by burying them before they left. Some experts suggest that climate change may have been a factor in the disappearance of the Norte Chico civilization, whilst others maintain that they didn't disappear at all. One theory is that the Norte Chico moved to other parts of Peru, taking their culture with them. One very likely scenario is that they took their irrigation further north and further south to areas that were more productive. It's interesting that in the Casma Valley, which is directly north, there are even bigger pyramids, and that was the next major cultural event. Recently, there has been much controversy over whether the North Chico Society at Corral and other sites actually constitutes a civilization. Many anthropologists and archaeologists have their own, often different definitions of the word, and the Norte Chico people do not qualify according to some of them. Professor Creamer commented, "Some people would say they were not a civilization. They had very few arts and crafts, for example. They were pre-ceramic. And if civilization needs urbanization, well, we don't know if these sites qualify as urban centers yet." Excavations are continuing in Soup Valley, and many important new discoveries are being reported. More ancient cities, pyramids and plazas have been found in an area which not so long ago was thought to be unlivable due to the harshness of the environment. After much more controversial results of recent research has been the new radiocarbon dates obtained from the ancient cities surrounding Corral. Shockingly, these dates suggest some of these cities may be even older than Corral. For some archaeologists, this is evidence that the true oldest city in the Americas has not yet been discovered. Ever since mummy KV55 was discovered in 1907, it has generated deep interest, debate, and controversy. The big issues have been identifying the KV55 mummy in ancient Egyptian history and combining its most probable identity with that person's proposed age of death. Could mummy KV55 really be the heretic pharaoh Akhenaten, as many scholars believe? If so, a team of scientists at the Forensic Anthropology, Paleopathology and Bioarchaeology FAPAB Research Centre in Sicily, Italy, have finally revealed the image of this famous pharaoh, and it's nothing like how he was portrayed in the ancient artwork. Facts and controversy surrounding mummy KV55. The mummy was found with grave tools attributed to different people and a desecrated coffin in the undecorated tomb KV55 in the Valley of the Kings in 1907 by an Egyptologist named Edward R. Ayrton. The tomb is just a few meters from Tutankhamun's tomb. Upon excavation, mummy KV55 disintegrated into dust and bones, so today it's only a skeleton. It was first suggested to be a queen due to a broad pelvis, but Australian scientist Grafton E. Smith later declared the remains are male. Mummy KV55's genetic results show that this is the genetic father of Tutankhamun. However, paleomolecular experts criticized some of the results in 2010. Historical and archaeological research, including some artifacts in the tomb, suggests that mummy KV55 is Akhenaten. Akhenaten, who ruled from 1353-36 to 35 BC, is known as the heretic pharaoh because he developed monotheism, worshipping the one true god of Aten, the sun disk. He was the son of Amenhotep III and father of Tutankhamun. Historical evidence, which is fragmented and conflicting, suggests that Akhenaten died when he was about 40 years old. However, mummy KV55 belongs to a man who is believed to have died in his early 20s. Some scholars argue that mummy KV-55's age of death demonstrate that this is actually an enigmatic late Amarna period person named Smenkhare. FAPAB Director Francesco M. Galassi, a physician and paleopathologist, and Egyptological Studies Coordinator Michael E. Habich oversaw the creation of the new facial recognition of the KV-55 mummy, which was completed by the well-known Brazilian expert Cicero Maes, who has been recognized for his skilled facial reconstructions. Dr. Michael, who is also an archaeologist, Egyptologist, and senior research fellow at Flinders University, Australia, told us about the new facial recognition and the research team's perspectives on the mystery surrounding mummy KV-55. So, when asked about the process used to create this facial reconstruction, Dr. Michael said that based on published data and images from various studies, a three-dimensional skull of model KV-55 was created. This was then checked again against the images. Facial muscles, eyes, fat pads and skin are now modelled on this digital skull model using the so-called Manchester method. The tissue thickness is determined for numerous anatomical points based on forensic mean values. The skin, eyes and shape of the ears are approximations based on the fact that this is an Egyptian, which accounts for brown eyes and a skin complexion that is still common in Egypt today. The facial reconstruction was blindfolded. Cicero Maes, the expert for face reconstruction, only received the skull data and information that it was a man from Egypt and not older than 25 years. Therefore, this reconstruction has no Egyptian crowns or royal jewelry to distort the impression. Therefore, Dr. Michael says, we think that our reconstruction is as objective as possible and follows purely scientific methods. However, there is a lot of controversy surrounding the skin color of ancient Egyptians, so how do they decide the choice of skin color for this reconstruction? He said that it's indeed a highly debated topic, but it should be assessed with an open mind, pushing away the racist connotations that have characterized this debate in the past. Dr. Michael said that they decided to use skin tone 4 in the Fitzpatrick scale of 1 to 6, which is typically encountered in Egypt and the Mediterranean, an olive complexion. Based on the available evidence, it would be unrealistic to opt for a much lighter or much darker skin tone. Eventually, a new genetic analysis of KV-55's remains would add more evidence. So therefore, why has it been so difficult to pinpoint the age of death for this mummy? Well, Dr. Michael says that it wasn't particularly difficult. He says that the comprehensive study by the late anthropologist Eugene Stroll demonstrated it required an objective evaluation using all available skeletal districts and a consultation of the recent anthropological literature. The main problem was the priory identification when Akhenaten plus the assumed age of death at the heretic pharaoh, about 30 years or older, and this has represented the main problem. But by objectively assessing the skeleton and published literature, it appears clear it belongs to a younger individual between the end of adolescence and early adulthood, 19 to 22 years. So with so much controversy surrounding the mummy's identification, who does Dr. Michael think is the best candidate? Is it Tutankhamun's father, Akhenaten? And if so, how does that information fit with the belief that his death occurred when he was around 40 years of age, and this mummy is younger? Or could the mummy be the remains of the enigmatic figure called Smelkar, as some scholars have proposed? Well, the answer is most reasonable to assume that Akhenaten and Nefertiti are the historical parents of Tutankhamun due to historic inscriptions. If one accepts the genetic study from 2010, KV-55 shall be the father and the younger lady KV-35 as the genetic mother of Tutankhamun. Historical records testify 17 years of reign by Akhenaten. It's debated if some of the first years might be a co-regency with his father Amenhotep III. Dr. Michael says that they acknowledge that at the age of 22 and 17 years of reign would make Akhenaten very young at the time of accession. It would hardly be arguable that Akhenaten could be the real father of the eldest daughters. The mummies of these daughters have not yet been identified, Swarmenhotep III could be the father, contrary to inscriptional propaganda. Since Tutankhamun was only born in the 12th year of Akhenaten, it's still possible that Akhenaten was the real father, even if he was very young. If Smenkhar is assumed to be the father of Tutankhamun, this is also problematic. There is no certain historical evidence that he was a younger brother of Akhenaten. Moreover, many experts argue that Smenkhar is in fact the fictitious figure that Queen Nefertiti assumed at the end of Akhenaten's reign in order to succeed him as male king, analogous to Hatshepsut, who ruled as King Mard-Kara. Is this Akhenaten? Why does he look so different from the ancient representations of the heretic pharaohs? Could this be due to the style of art that was used by artists in the Amarna period? Well, Dr. Michael says it turns out that Egyptian art is generally not very realistic, but reflects a desired ideal image, especially in the case of the king. In the Amarna period, a grotesque, almost comic-like sense of art was introduced. In the course of time, art became more moderate and elegant again. The famous Berlin bust of Nefertiti is in this later tradition. It's therefore not surprising that the family members of the royal family of Amarna look normal and not like in Amarna art. The research team is currently finishing work on a full-length anthropological report of their study of mummy KV55 and their facial reconstruction. It will be published in a peer-reviewed international journal.